Question is, how do you see a career in addiction counseling or human services playing a role in our community?
Okay, so I personally work in WISE services, which is wraparound intensive services. So it is a level 3 crisis service. And what that means is it's one step down from hospitalization. So WISE was actually birthed from a lawsuit for Medicaid individuals not receiving the services that they needed in a timely manner. And so the work that I get to do is very meaningful in the fact that families that would typically wait for services, their needs are being met sooner rather than later. So the True Blood lawsuit, which was the birthplace of WISE services for Medicaid recipients, was actually from a child that committed suicide because they were waiting and they weren't getting adequate services, as opposed to somebody that would have like private insurance. And so we really get to be that buffer and help families that may go to the wayside, waiting on Medicaid, and really be able to support them through a really challenging time in their life. And so the other beautiful part about WISE is that not only do they have like a therapist that meets with them weekly, but they have intensive case management, 24-hour access to a crisis line that has a specific safety plan that is created from the family. So as opposed to like reaching out to the regional crisis line, which they wouldn't know anything about you. This is tailored for the family individually on everything that they've included in their own specific individualized crisis plan. And then they get a parent partner, which is somebody that has lived experience in raising and navigating the behavioral health system. So that becomes like the parent's person that can help them support and really understand like what they're going through trying to navigate all these systems.
Hmm. So you're talking about basically bridging the gap between like the time that there's a need for the service and the time that that service becomes available to people.
Yeah, yeah. I think we can see that too in like, um, addiction, substance use disorder services as well. Like there can be a gap in when a person is ready to receive services as opposed to when they actually will receive services. And I think that they are doing a lot of like groundbreaking work to change that.
Mm-hmm.
But WISE for families with behavioral health needs, this is really bridging that gap. Yeah.
Mm. Okay. And so what kind of education would you suggest someone who's interested in the field of, addiction studies and sort of like this human interest sort of subject? Like, what education would you suggest they pursue?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Um, so I think really I think a college education can help um, better equip someone to maybe understand like the makeup with the brain and how that affects a person. Personally, I can appreciate somebody that has lived experience. And so I think promoting people who have been through substance use disorder are extremely valuable. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that's something that can be taught in an educational setting.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Um,
But I think that college can really make a person more well-rounded to understand some of the other, like, so in AA, like, I feel like there's a lot of components of that that can help with communication and understanding, being more well-spoken, professionalism, and there's a lot of things that college can bring to the table. And then really understanding like how the brain and chemicals and all of that work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, okay, and like in your opinion and through your personal experience, what do you believe is the most common reason that people get trapped into those addictions that, potentially mm, disrupt everything in their life and put them in such a vulnerable and dark place? Like that's obviously something that people would never choose, right? So what is like um, the most common thing that these people have in common, that you think plays a part in that sort of addiction?
So for me personally, my personal opinion is like definitely trauma. I mean, we can look at like the ACEs study through Kaiser and see how people's ACEs score is a result of like why they choose some of the choices that they make as far as like with picking up substance. And then I think that chemical, once that muscle memory is like set off with a substance, it really does it for me personally, I have lived experience with understanding like how that affects you and how hard it is to uh, come out of that.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think, once your brain is hijacked by these chemicals, and once your brain is processing information different and your priorities have been realigned, because of some like real chemical things that are going on in your brain, the expectation that someone is capable of making rational decisions at that point seems unrealistic. You know what I
Mm,
mean?
yeah.
So, this is something I'd like to ask too, because so we talked about the most common thing that you see in addicts. So, as you know, in talking about the ACEs score, um, the flip side of that coin is the resiliency scale. And so what is it that you've seen throughout your experience that, with people that you're trying to help, what are some things that people who do really well and succeed and make some like radical changes, what are the commonalities between them, if any?
Oh, this is a really great question because so when the pandemic hit, we still were working from, we didn't skip a beat. We were still, home based, but providing services through phone or telehealth. And these are families who we're home and community based. So we are in the homes, we're meeting with them, and now we were sheltered in place. So we were kind of in an essence like cut off that personable approach of being there with them. So it was really actually I don't know, really insightful to see that the families that I was serving were like, oh, all everything that we've been through has led up to this. Like we're fine. And not that it was always like that throughout the year and a half that we were like working from home, but they had the resiliency that some of the therapists that I worked with did not have. So therapists that I work with, they were like falling apart and they were like, I don't know, I'm going to do this. They didn't have the resiliency that some of the families who have been through so, excuse my French, they've been through so much shit that like this was, they were able to mentally like process that, holy cow, the whole world is in a pandemic. But so some of their lived experience, the things that they've been through, the really hard things, um, made it so that they were capable to kind of process that everything that we knew and everything of the way that we were functioning before is now different. That's gone. So even people that were master level therapists were not able to digest like this pandemic in the way that the families who have been through a lot of adversity were able to be like, oh, I've got this, you know?
Mm,
So,
yeah. So there's like they've had to flex that muscle that allows for like, I mean,
yeah,
they've been forced to like adapt so many times to situations that were
yeah,
outside of their control, that it was,
yeah,
they had more of a strength in knowing that, okay, I've overcome these things in my life. Like this is nothing.
yeah.
Okay.
So you overcome like, so we're talking about uh overcoming like the culture, like with living within like the culture of poverty, living in crisis situations, living in abuse, like all of these things that um they have adapted themselves to, that say, you know, a master level therapist is like, oh my gosh, I can't get some of the dry goods that I normally am accustomed to. So my life is falling apart,
Yeah,
you
right.
know? And
They've always kind of had really tight control over their life, and or at least the illusion that they had control. And yeah.
I witnessed that firsthand. And so it was really interesting to see, like, yes, a lot of these families, their ACEs scores are a lot higher than, say, some of these well-educated individuals who haven't experienced as much trauma from what I know of. Um, that, you know, worldwide pandemic is affecting these individuals differently than it's affecting these individuals.
Yeah.
Because I was unsure of what it would be like when I was a support person in this capacity. I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to be at home with their child who's like falling apart, who's suicidal, who's homicidal, who's violent, and they're not going to have anybody to like sit and talk with in the same capacity. What's this going to be like? It was a lot different than I expected.
Mm. Okay, so like in regards to addiction, what do you feel like out of the different sort of substance addictions that exist, what do you feel is the most difficult addiction to like to overcome, or has like the lowest rate of recovery?
uh, I think, oh, I don't know the technical term for it, but as far as like food addiction, that's what I think.
Mm. Ah, yeah, that makes sense
So,
because it's inescapable. It's not something you can, I mean, it's necessary for survival, and yeah,
yeah,
and was
yeah,
the first comfort we ever received, right?
yeah, yeah. So way before, you know, uh, you had access to, you know, methamphetamines or heroin or whatever, you had access to donuts. And so
Mm,
that muscle memory, and I think we see that a lot too. And like when people put down certain substance, they pick up food. So they go right back to that comfort